Mergle hadn't seen one of these before. It was shorter and rounder than the others, almost squishy. He stared at it in wonder, never having encountered anything so ugly. Its skin was a sickly cream pink, with a thatch of yellow weeds sprouting from its head. Two tiny eyes, the colour of a frigid lake, were sunken on each side of a snail-like protuberance at the centre of its face. The sight of the creature lurking in his garden revolted him. He wanted to flame it, char it to a decent shade, and scorch its skin into pleasant ruffles and ridges. But Mergle didn't. He was afraid to blow burning gas. He usually burped and gagged, and then the other dragons laughed at him. The girls always made fun of him. Perdie had asked him in front of the whole clan if he'd like to light her fire. He couldn't even get up a spark. Embarrassed, he had run away to sulk in his hideaway, where he had buried all his treasure. The stones and things he'd found were the only things he had that the others didn't. Of course, they would have shunned him if they knew about his collection. They didn't like anything from across the river. He wasn't old enough to understand why, so he kept everything buried beneath the banana bush in the garden. Whenever he was upset, he would go there and spread out all the shiny things to play with. The garden was a quiet place, isolated from the clan because it was so near the river and what lay beyond. None of the other dragons went there. They didn't like being that close to the things that lived in the valley. Instead, they perched in their caves, fathers puffing smoke rings while the girls let out sweet fumes, waiting to be lit. Mergle's garden was in a thicket close enough to the water to hear the monotonous splashing. It was a perfect place to loll in the sun during the lazy months. There he could rest easy, watching the forest, river, and land beyond. He sat for days watching butterflies hatch from the banana bush above his head. He'd spend hours watching clouds come and go over the hills surrounding the narrow valley. It was quite by accident that he stumbled upon the place. In a blind rage a year earlier, he'd fled from his father, down the mountain and unwarily across the river. His father had arranged for him to attend a flame-in with one of the clan's hottest girls. The thought of burning with hot lips had disgusted Mergle into panic. He'd wandered stupefied in the strange land of the valley until dawn. Horrified by the realization of where he was, he'd hidden out for weeks, trying to find his way back to the river. One night, while retreating from a band of strange creatures, Mergle had come across the treasure. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was pretty, so he'd stuffed it into his brood pouch under his belly. The next day, he relocated the river and crossed it just below where the thicket opened in the forest. Completely exhausted from his vigil of escape, he staggered into the open area and slept for a fortnight. Later, Mergle saw the worth of having a personal sanctuary and buried his treasure there. Before heading home, he ate heartily from the purple banana bush that concealed his pretty baubles. When he finally returned to his father after months of absence, his father gushed fire with happiness. He said he was proud of his son. Apparently, he thought Mergle had spent time scorching the hills with some girl. As usual, Mergle blushed a lurid green. From then on, though, his father didn't force the girls on him, assuming Mergle was sparking his own relationships. That made things a little easier, but was the main reason Mergle was caught unaware by Perdie the following year. He was drinking at the spring under the cliff when she sidled over to him. Several of her girlfriends clustered behind her sinuous tail. Her body was lushly thick and rough, the virgin scales glistening in the air. The pungent sweetness of methane hung around her like a cloak. Like an aphrodisiac, the scent watered Mergle's eyes as he turned from the pool. Her swaggering torso made the scales of his spine stand erect. It was the first time any girl had made an open pass at him. He was speechless, scared silly, and stopped breathing for a second. The spark in his throat went out. She was so beautiful, and he knew he was such an awkward dragon. The moments near her were a nightmare. Everyone was watching. Most of the clan had been at the pool, taking a morning drink, and others hurried over to see the Virgin's first fire. Even Mergle's father was there, sternly waiting on a ledge. Chapter 2. Perdie. Perdie's scales shimmered with potential, like unpolished gems waiting for their first light. She lounged by the clan's spring, surrounded by her circle of still unlit females. Though not yet aflame, Perdie was undeniably the most coveted young dragon in the clan. Her form was the most graceful, her scales the most lustrous, her potential flame promised to be the hottest. She exuded superiority, as if only the right dragon could light her up. As the young females chattered dreamily about flame lighting, Perdie's eyes darted to a solitary figure at the edge of the babbling water. Mergle, the clan oddity. The dragon couldn't even light his own flame. "Watch this," Perdie whispered to her friends, a mischievous glint in her eye. She rose, her movements fluid and purposeful, spread her satiny wings, and skip flew across the lagoon towards Mergle. Her friends tittered in anticipation. "Hey, Mergle," Perdie called out, her voice syrupy. "Thinking about any flame lighting soon? Oh wait, you'd need a spark first, wouldn't you?" She fluttered her eye scales mockingly, eliciting not just giggles but outright laughter that echoed across the water. Mergle's scales flushed a deep green as he looked up, his eyes wide with trepidation. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a weak sputter emerged. Perdie could hear the cackles as her friends erupted in laughter. "Aw, your tongue twisted and tied? Or maybe you're saving your voice for when you finally manage to light," Perdie teased, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt the sting of her own cruelty, watching Mergle wither with shame. Because the truth was, every stammered word, every flustered look from Mergle sent a chill through her scales that no dragon should have caused. It made her angry, and she hated her reaction. Perdie watched as Mergle struggled to escape, his face burnished with deep, unbearable humiliation. Her friends were still clucking raucously, congratulating her on another successful taunt, but Perdie barely heard them. Instead, she found herself wondering why Mergle's put-down affected her so deeply. The thought of such a bungling dragon terrified her. Chapter 3. Mergle. Mergle rushed into the woods and down the mountainside. He crashed madly through the forest on all 6 legs, the front pair clumsily hampering him. Only when he reached the safety of the thicket did he slow to catch his breath. He lay in the sun for a while, cursing the clan and flushing green at the thought of Perdie. Gradually recovering from the humiliation, he lumbered lazily to the banana bush. While picking a fruit with one appendage, he carefully dug up his glittering stones with another. Last out of the hole was a large brooch with a brilliant clear stone set in it. The brooch was Mergle's favourite. As far as he knew, it wasn't good for anything, but it was the prettiest. He could see hundreds of colours and reflections when he focused his eyes on it. Of all the bits and pieces, this was his real treasure. He loved the brooch most because it worshipped and thrived upon the sun as he did. The rest of his cash was just lifeless junk. Mostly he kept it because all the other dragons wouldn't like it. Mergle left his treasure spread out in his secret garden for a moment, while he stumbled off into the deeper woods to do a thing all good dragons have to do once in a while. When he finished, he made his way back through the undergrowth slowly. Uneasily, he approached the thicket. Something smelled wrong. He stopped outside the garden and peered through the bushes. A shorter, skinnier version of the things that lived across the river squatted amidst his treasure. Mergle wanted to scorch the thing in his garden, not in anger, but to make it more reasonable to look at. The thing's skin was so soft and bleached that it turned his stomach. It wasn't like the ones he'd seen the year before when he'd wandered in the valley. They had hard shells and scales, although they were shiny and silverish. And they hadn't had these long yellow strings growing out of their heads. Mergle was so stymied by the thing's presence in his secret sanctuary that he couldn't move. He was powerless. He knew he could crush the thing if nothing else. The thing probably only weighed a trifling 120 pounds. But it was so grotesquely smooth and ugly, he could only watch in paralysed fascination. The squatting creature did a very curious thing. It picked up a small piece and proceeded to attach it to the flap on the side of its head. It did the same thing with an identical piece, hooking it to the flap on the other side of its head. Then, it suddenly grabbed Mergle's favourite brooch and darted toward the river. He heard splashing and turned his head in that direction. He was so astonished he couldn't budge. Mergle stood beside the banana bush, curling his claws in the moist soil. His tail tapped spasmodically, flattening the green grass. Squirrels that usually cleaned fallen nuts from his garden now scampered away in fright, An irritated frown masked his contemplation. His eyes reddened, making his colossal head appear like a holiday celebration tree. He couldn't help but blow off steam. It wasn't so much that the ugly thing had taken some of the treasure. What really flustered Mergle was that the thing had the gall to take his favourite piece. He didn't care about the rest of the stuff. It was just pretty garbage. After all, Mergle had taken it from somebody too, but the original owner hadn't been there to protest. Mergle was very unhappy. He had no idea what to do. He was forever being confronted with impossible situations. The river was cold at that time of year, chilly enough to make him shiver right through his scales. He didn't want to cross it into the land of the other side. Chapter 4. Perdie. After Mergle's fumbling retreat, Perdie found herself swept up in a whirlwind of chatter and excitement with her friends. They crowded around her, scales gleaming in anticipation of future flame lighting, their eagerness palpable in the air, sighs of methane that only dragons could smell. Azra, one of Perdie's closest friends, squealed, "Did you see how fast he scuttled away? Could barely get airborne." Azra folded her wings across her chest in disgust. "I swear, Mergle gets more pathetic every day." Perdie forced a smile, stifling the surge of remorse that threatened to surface. "He does make it too easy," she said, her voice not quite matching the ridicule in her friend's eyes. Crenlo, the boldest of the group, nudged Perdie with her wing. "So, have you decided who you'll ask to light your flame? Every dragon here would give their left wing for the chance." The question jolted Perdie's composure. She had been dreading this conversation. "Oh, I haven't really thought about it," she lied, avoiding her friend's eager gazes. "Haven't thought about it?" gasped MC, the shyest of the group, in total disbelief. "But Perdie, it's the most important decision of our lives. The dragon who lights your flame becomes your partner for eternity, through life and death." Before Perdie could respond, a shadow fell over the group. Elder Tembra, one of the clan's oldest and most respected dragons, approached silently. Now, ladies." The Grand Lady's voice was gentle but weighted heavily with authority, her words carrying the moment's gravity. "Your first flame-lighting day will be special for each and every one of you. Indeed, a momentous occasion, but it's not a decision to be rushed or taken lightly. It binds you for all time, no matter who or when." The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in vibrant hues, orange and pink, jets of violet. Elder Tembra turned from the young dragons and set her weathered eyes on Perdie, her aged eyes unobscured by their ancient, cloudy haze. Perdie felt stripped and scaleless, as if those ancient orbs could see right through her carefully constructed facade. "My dear, would you care to join me for an evening flight? There's much I'd like to discuss with you." Perdie nodded, curiosity and apprehension fluttering in her chest. As they took to the skies, their wings catching the last rays of sunlight, Perdie marvelled at the elder's grace. Despite her years and leathery wings, Tembra's movements were fluid and powerful. They soared over the lush valley, the clan's world sprawling beneath them. Elder Tembra's words carried on the wind, steeped in the lore of countless generations. "You see, Perdie, we have dwelt here longer than our tales can remember. Every one of us carries with us our own personal story. Each scale on my body could tell you about triumph, loss, and love." The elder's eyes gleamed with memories, but none are as important as the story of our flames. Perdie found herself captivated, her earlier discomfort momentarily forgotten. "What do you mean?" Tembra banked silently, leading them in a wide arc over the dusky, winding waterway. "Long ago, before our memories began, we discovered the sacred bond of flame lighting. It wasn't just about continuing our species, but about forging connections that transcend the physical, that span ages and realms beyond our sight." The elder's voice took on a wistful tone. "Flame lighting isn't merely for your enjoyment, your excitement, Perdie. It's a bridge between past and future, a promise to carry our legacy forward." They glided over a series of cliffs, where young dragons practiced aerial maneuvers. Perdie watched them, thinking of her own impending flame lighting. Sensing her thoughts, Tembra continued, I know the weight of expectation can be heavy, the obligation we feel imposed by others, especially for one as magnificent as you. But remember, the greatest obligation we have is to ourselves, to be true to our own hearts. Perdie's thoughts immediately flew to Mergle, and she felt her scales bristle with a storm of emotions, which she despised. But Elder, she ventured, what if one's heart doesn't align with what's expected? Tembra chuckled softly, the sound mixing with the whisper of the wind. Ah, therein lies the greatest challenge and the greatest reward. Our history is filled with those who dared to fly against the wind, Perdie. It is often they who soar the highest. As they circled back towards the clan's gathering place, now dotted with the glow of evening fires, Elder Tembra's voice grew serious. Your flame lighting is approaching, yes, but do not let others' expectations douse the spark of your true desires. A flame lit without genuine passion is a pale imitation of what it could be. They landed softly as the first stars emerged in the deepening twilight. Elder Tembra turned to Perdie, her eyes kind but penetrating. Think about what I've said, young one, and remember, the path to your true flame may not be the most travelled, but it will be the most worth flying. As Elder Tembra's form receded into the gathering shadows, Perdie remained rooted to the spot, her mind a maelstrom of wrestling thoughts and emotions. The Elder's words echoed in her head, mingling with the presumptions of her peers and the whispers of her own heart. The sun rose and set, and Perdie became withdrawn, her usually vibrant presence subdued. Her friends noticed, but she brushed off their concerns with practiced ease. Just thinking about the whole thing, she'd say with a forced smile, and they'd nod understandingly, launching into yet another gossip about potential flame lighters. But Perdie's thoughts were far from the gabfest. Instead, they kept drifting to Mergle and memories she'd long suppressed. After her flight with Elder Tembra, Perdie found herself atop her favourite cliff, watching as the waning light painted the Dragonlands in hues of purple and gold. Below, the clan bustled with preparations for the outcomes of anticipated flame lightings. But up here, away from prying eyes, Perdie allowed her carefully crafted mask to slip. She gazed at her reflection in a small pool of rainwater, her scales still dull without the glow of an inner flame. The sight seemed to mock her, a reminder of the decision that loomed ever closer. Perdie was the envy of every unlit female in the clan, with suitors lining up to be the one to ignite her fire. Yet the thought of any of them touching her, of allowing them to light her flame, left her cold. Instead, her mind wandered to Mergle, sweet, awkward Mergle, who couldn't even produce a spark. Perdie closed her eyes, memories washing over her like gentle waves. She remembered the first time she'd really noticed him, years ago. They were both just beyond hatchlings, barely able to fly. Mergle had been trying to join a game of tag, but the other young dragons kept flying just out of his reach, laughing as he flapped clumsily after them. Perdie had watched from afar, feeling a strange urge to intervene, to tell them to stop. But she hadn't. She'd just watched, silent, as Mergle eventually gave up and glided away, his head hanging low. Another memory surfaced. Mergle, a bit older, presenting a strange, shiny object to the clan elders. His eyes had been so bright, so full of excitement as he explained his discovery. But the elders had frowned, muttering about dangerous rocks and crossing the forbidden river. They'd told him to make it disappear, to take it away, bury it, and never speak of it again. And Mergle had slunk away, dejected. Perdie remembered feeling frustrated on his behalf, wanting to tell him that she thought his discovery was fascinating. Then there was the time, not too long ago, when Mergle accidentally set fire to his own tail during flame practice. While the other males roared and spewed fire with laughter, Perdie had to bite her tongue to stop herself from rushing to his aid. She'd seen embarrassment flash in his eyes, quickly resolving into sheer determination as he doused his tail and tried again, and again, and again. "What is wrong with me?" Perdie muttered, shaking her head to dispel the flood of memories. She was expected to choose the best, to want a strong, confident dragon, one who could produce a magnificent flame. Not Mergle. The memory of their encounter at the spring rose unbidden. Guilt gnawed at her, as she recalled the hurt in Mergle's eyes, the way he had shrunk away from her taunts. Thinking about any flame lighting soon? Oh wait, you'd need a spark first, wouldn't you? The words echoed in her mind, filled with the cruel laughter of her friends. She remembered the pain she had caused. I didn't mean it, she whispered to the empty air. I can't let them see. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Perdie's unease about Mergle's absence grew too strong to ignore. Reluctantly, she spread her wings and glided down from her cliff-top perch, resolved to seek answers from the clan. Chapter 5. Mergle. Mergle wasn't sure what he'd do if he ever caught up with the squishy pink creature. He'd never talked with one before. No one had, partly because they were so ugly to look at. But he could try. He clawed anxiously at the loose ground. The other baubles looked so plain sitting there. He had to have the brooch back. He would offer to trade the rest of the things for it. He slipped the other pieces gingerly into the brood pouch on his belly. Mergle splashed noisily across the river, trying to keep as many feet as possible out of the cold. Climbing breathlessly to the top of the foreign bank, he shivered violently, scales clattering rhythmically. Wary of the loud disturbance he was making, he scuttled off through the brush to avoid attention. There probably weren't any of the other creatures around, but he hadn't expected one in his garden either. Mergle was apprehensive about catching up with it. Its creamy pink skin was horrible, but his worry was overcome by a strong sense of loss. Its trail wasn't hard to find. The creature was so small it couldn't trample its own path and had to follow an already open route. Mergle lumbered on, slowly and cautiously, not eager for a confrontation. He came upon the pink one at the edge of a field. He waited, hiding behind a boulder, like a mountain hiding behind an elvesberry bush. The creature was in the middle of the field, gazing wistfully into Mergle's brooch. He wanted to shout to it, beg with it. In the distance, he heard the clacking of hooves against hard ground. Mergle was startled and wondered what other creature he would have to contend with. From the far side of the field, 2 more creatures came. One was a type Mergle was familiar with, silver-shelled, and just about the size of the one that had stolen his brooch. It was clinging to the back of yet another type of creature. That one was larger, almost Mergle's own size, but was covered with faded white fur. It ran on all 4s. The silver one was waving a shiny stick around its head. Mergle was pleased by the greeting. The silver one wanted to be friends. The thought warmed him, and suddenly his spark was rekindled. Proud of being the first dragon brave enough to talk to the shiny shells, Mergle rose upright and sprayed out a friendly flame. Chapter 6. Perdie. Her first stop was the spring, where her friends gathered in the cool evening air. As she descended, she could hear their laughter and chatter. "Hey, Perdie!" Azra called out. "We were all talking about who we would pick for flame lighting. Have you finally decided who you're going to ask?" Perdie forced a smile, suppressing her unease. "Actually, I was wondering if anyone had seen Mergle lately. He seems to have disappeared." The group fell silent before erupting into giggles and snorts. "Mergle?" Crenlow snickered. "Why in the world are you looking for that sparkless wonder?" MC nudged Perdie playfully. "Don't tell me you're considering him for your flame lighting. Can he even produce more than a puff of smoke?" Perdie felt her scales heat, flustered and indignant. "Of course not," she snapped, perhaps too quickly. "I just noticed he hasn't been around, that's all." "Who cares?" Azra rolled her eyes. "He's probably off sulking in the forest again. You know how he is." Realizing she'd get no help from her friends, Perdie made excuses and left, their giggling following her as she flew towards the elders' gathering place. She found Elder Tembra deep in conversation with several other seniors. Waiting respectfully for a pause, Perdie folded her wings, tilted her face to the ground, and cleared her throat. "Elder Tembra, I apologize for the interruption, but I was wondering if you knew where Mergle might be. He's been gone for several days now." The elders exchanged baffled looks, their eyes narrowing with scorn. "Mergle?" one of them grumbled. "That odd youngster who's always bringing back strange, forbidden trinkets from across the river?" Elder Tembra's gaze sharpened as she regarded Perdie. I'm afraid we haven't seen him, dear. But you know how he is, always wandering off on his own. I'm sure he'll turn up eventually. Another elder snorted. Probably for the best, he keeps to himself. That one's nothing but trouble, always poking around where he doesn't belong. Perdie bristled at their dismissive attitudes. But shouldn't we be concerned? What if something's happened? Now, Tembra soothed, though her tone held a note of warning. I'm sure there's no need for alarm. Mergle is different, yes, but he's always managed to take care of himself. Perhaps it's best we leave him be. Frustrated and increasingly worried, Perdie thanked the elders and retreated. As she perched on a nearby rock, her mind raced. The clan's indifference to Mergle's absence bothered her more than she cared to admit. She gazed towards the shadowy forest near the Forbidden River, where Mergle often disappeared. The thought of venturing there sent a shiver down her spine. It was a dangerous, taboo territory, if she were caught. But the memory of Mergle's gentle eyes and the wound she'd caused at the spring nagged at her. And uninvited, Elder Tembra's words about following one's heart echoed in her mind. Perdie closed her eyes, clashing emotions battling within her. The weight of tradition and trust pressed down on one side, while concern for Mergle and a strange, unnamed feeling pulled on the other. As the moon rose higher in the sky, Perdie made her decision. She would wait until the clan roosted for the night, then, under the cover of darkness, she would venture into the forbidden forest. She had to find Mergle and understand why he bothered her so much. Perdie hunkered down to wait, her scales prickling with determination, even as she clenched her claws nervously, oblivious that her actions could change everything. The clan slipped off into slumber, and Perdie slipped away from her perch. The moon cast an ethereal glow across the landscape as she took to the air, her wings barely whistling in the still night. The forbidden forest loomed before her, a dark mass of twisted shapes and unknown dangers. Perdie's heart raced as she glided over the treetops, her eyes straining in the dim light for any sign of Mergle. Hours passed, each moment stretching into an eternity of disappointment. Perdie searched tirelessly, combing every clearing, every rocky outcrop where Mergle might have sought shelter. But the forest remained silent, indifferent to her growing torment. As the moon descended towards the horizon, exhaustion and despair started to creep in. Perdie alighted on a high outcropping of rock, her wings aching from the prolonged flight. Maybe they were right, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the soft rustle of leaves. Maybe I'm foolish for worrying, for caring. She was about to give up, to return to the clan with her tail tucked in shame, when a glint caught her eye. There, in a small clearing below the cliff, something reflected the moonlight. Filled with curiosity, Perdie glided down for a closer look, hopeful it was a sign. Her breath caught in her throat. A collection of strange, shiny objects was scattered across the forest floor. Mergle's secret cache of treasures. Perdie landed softly, her claws barely disturbing the odd assortment of baubles. "Mergle?" she called out, apprehension choking her voice. "Mergle, are you here?" Only the chirping of insects answered her call. Perdie moved carefully through the clearing, her eyes wide with wonder as she examined Mergle's collection. There were smooth, round rocks gleaming like captured starlight, twisted, shiny shapes that caught the moonbeams in fascinating ways, and other intricate, fragile items she couldn't even begin to describe. As she rummaged through the treasures, Perdie felt like she was seeing a side of Mergle she'd never known. Inquisitive, intrigued, appreciative of beauty in the strangest places. "Oh, Mergle," she murmured, a thorny tangle of emotions twisting her gut. "What have you been up to all this time?" Her gaze drifted to the edge of the clearing, where the trees thinned out, barely revealing the forbidden river. The water danced in the moonlight, a silver ribbon cutting through the darkness. Beyond it lay the unknown lands, the source of Mergle's treasures, and quite possibly, Mergle himself. A shiver of dread rippled along Perdie's spine as she contemplated the unthinkable. Crossing the river was strictly taboo, drilled into every young dragon from the moment they could understand speech. The dangers were unknown, but said to be horrifying. Yet Mergle had clearly crossed it, perhaps many times, and now he was missing. Perdie stood at the edge of the clearing, her claws digging into the soft earth as she wrestled with her decision. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to return to the clan's safety. But the thought of Mergle, alone and in that strange land beyond, tugged at her heart. She cautiously made her way through the undergrowth to the water's edge and peered intently across the river, striving to penetrate the darkness. What mysteries lurked beyond? What perils awaited her? And most chilling of all, what might she find? The river whispered its timeless melody, beckoning and cautioning, while the moon continued its relentless descent. Perdie stood motionless, watching, wary, fear and duty surging within her like two powerful winds threatening to tear her apart. The familiar breezes of tradition fluttered against her scales, while an inexplicable updraft pulled at her heart, irresistibly urging her to soar into unknown skies. In that moment, poised on the precipice of a decision that would change her life forever, Perdie understood the true weight of Elder Tembra's words about following one's heart. Whatever she chose now, there would be no going back. Chapter 7. Mergle. The little pink creature seemed to become aware of Mergle for the first time. It let out a horrifying screech and started running away from him. It tripped, and the brooch flew out of its grasp. It quickly got up and continued running towards the oncoming ones. Mergle rushed forward and grabbed the fallen brooch. He was confused. He didn't understand what was happening and wasn't sure how to act. He let out another friendly flame in greeting. That only appeared to enrage the charging creatures. The silver one swung the shiny stick around its head some more and emitted a hoarse cry. Mergle was fully erect now, in the most formal of dragon poses. He belched orange fire in the politest manner he could attain. He was bewildered by the tiny creature's responses. The white furry one rose on its hind legs in an almost dragon-like salutation. In doing so, the small, silver-shelled one lost its grip and fell to the ground. It staggered for a moment, and then assumed a peculiar stance facing Mergle. Again, the creature resumed its stick-waving. Mergle spouted a slightly red flame in puzzlement. He towered over the silver creature, at a loss for how to react. The creatures were angry for some reason. The white furry one had retreated, and the soft pink one had crumpled to the ground like a fruit peeling cast aside. Mergle reached into the brood pouch on his tender belly and pulled out some of the treasure. The silver one leaped back. Mergle offered some of the pieces. The silver-shelled one appeared about to rush forward to accept the offering. Mergle sighed a flame of relief. The creature lunged forward with the shiny stick held high. The shaft tore into Mergle's soft belly and plunged into his heart. The creature sliced upwards and twisted, splitting Mergle's chest wide, blood and internals spewing forth. As the pain surged through him, Mergle's confusion turned to a heartbreaking realization. They think I'm attacking them. I just wanted to be friends. Why so much hatred? Why do they hate me? His eyes clouded with tears that couldn't come, a noiseless plea lost in his throat, and the world darkened one last time. The silver creature yanked its pointed stick free and jumped back as Mergle toppled dead into the field, the dragon's sadness and betrayal fading to black across his silent, staring eyes. The creature let out a wild bellow, dancing and waving the pointed stick in triumph, went and retrieved the fallen brooch near Mergle, and returned to wrap an arm around the soft pink one, drawing the small one to its side, clenching a silvered fist above its head in victory. As they surveyed the field, they looked back at Mergle's lifeless body, their expressions a mix of thrill and joy. Still clutching the brooch, the little pink creature glanced at Mergle's offering scattered on the ground. For a moment, a look of doubt crossed its face, as if beginning to grasp the tragic misunderstanding. But then the look disappeared as quickly as it had come. Chapter 8. Perdie. With a deep breath, Perdie spread her wings and launched across the rushing torrent. The pre-dawn air was crisp against her scales as she soared over the misty water, her heart pounding with fear, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. Each wing beat carried her further from everything she'd ever known, and closer to the mysterious uncertainty ahead. As the fog cleared and the first rays of sunlight painted the sky, a foreign landscape unfolded before her. Unrecognizable, small caves of angular stone piles rose from the ground, their smooth surfaces casting long shadows in the morning light. Their openings were odd, too small for the smallest hatchling to enter. In the distance, a central massive stone mountain towered above all else, hundreds of tiny caves like eyes in the rock, with pointy, jagged tops reaching upwards like the talons of some colossal beast. Perdie's eyes darted from one unfamiliar sight to another, her senses overwhelmed. Movement below caught her attention. Small, soft forms scurrying among the orderly piles of rocks, the squishy creatures. She'd heard tales of them, but witnessing them firsthand stuttered her wing beats precariously. As she watched, fascinated and repulsed, a glint of light from a cave in the side of the tallest stone peak drew her attention. Standing on a high cliff edge was a squishy creature holding something that caught the sunlight. The object was brilliant, reflecting hundreds of colours almost magically. Perdie's heart skipped a beat as she recognized it with a jolt. It was Mergle's favourite brooch, the one he had shown to the clan elders with such pride. She remembered the clear, brilliant rock it held, how it worshipped the sun just like Mergle did. The elders had dismissed it as dangerous, but Perdie had always considered it beautiful. Now, seeing it in the hands of this creature, she felt the crush of divergent emotions. How did it end up here? She wondered, her mind racing. This creature must have encountered Mergle, but what had happened? The memory of Mergle's excitement and the elder's rebuke flashed through her mind, bringing pangs of sorrow and a torrent of guilt. The realization that this brooch had somehow crossed the forbidden river, just like Mergle, made her want to confront the squishy one. But before she could consider swooping lower for a better look, a commotion in the nearby forest pulled her attention away. Circling silently over the treetops, Perdie watched in horror as a frenzy of creatures in a clearing closed in for a kill. What she saw made her blood curdle. A group of squishy creatures with long, pointed, gleaming sticks surrounded a majestic stag, more magnificent than the ones she had worshipped, thanked, slain, and eaten. This proud animal's eyes were wide with panic as the creatures closed in. In a flurry of movement too quick for Perdie to fully comprehend, the stag surrendered and fell, pierced by dozens of the sticks, its life seeping into the forest floor. Perdie recoiled at the savagery. She had seen predators hunt before. It was the way of nature. She was an excellent one. She had to eat and grow. But this seemed different. The squishy creatures didn't appear to be hunting for food or survival. There was a coldness, a detachment in their actions that chilled Perdie to her core. As she wheeled away from the gruesome scene, her mind reeling, a new fear gripped her heart. If these creatures could do such things, to be so ruthless and unthankful, trapping a mighty stag, what might they do to a dragon? What might they have already done to Mergle? Perdie scanned the landscape with renewed urgency, desperate for any sign of her missing clanmate. She flew over dense forests, across open fields, and along the edges of places filled with squishy creatures, always keeping high, hoping to avoid detection. Perdie's hope faded as the sun climbed higher in the sky. On the verge of turning back to beg for help from her clan, something caught her eye. In a small clearing not far from the river lay a form too large to be one of the squishy creatures and too large to be another stag. Perdie's chest tightened with dread as she spiraled downward. As she drew closer, her worst fears materialized before her eyes. Mergle lay motionless amidst the trampled grasses near the edge of the trees, his once vibrant scales now dull and lifeless, blood everywhere from the gaping wound of his split-open chest. Landing beside him, Perdie screeched an earth-shattering wail, unleashing a keening cry that shattered the air. "Mergle! Oh, Mergle, no!" She nuzzled his still form, willing him to move, to breathe, to show any flicker of life. But Mergle remained motionless, gone, his gentle eyes closed forever. Unimaginable grief crashed over her in a tsunami of pain. Mergle, no, 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 she howled, her voice cracking with anguish. Desperately, Perdie pounded Mergle's back with her claws as if she could force life into him. Live, live! Oh, please, Mergle, live! What have they done to you? You can't leave me like this. Not now, not when I've finally found you. At that moment, as if answering her pleas, a last spark flickered from deep within Mergle. It grew, fanned by Perdie's frantic efforts until his frozen lips parted. A small flame burst forth, catching Perdie mid-wail. It leaped between them like a flickering kiss, igniting something profound within her soul. Perdie recoiled, gasping as warmth flooded her body. Her scales began to glow, and an intense heat built in her chest. In his final act, Mergle bestowed upon her the greatest gift a dragon could receive, her first flame, binding them together for eternity. But there was no time to marvel at this awakening. The thundering of hooves filled the air, growing louder by the second. Perdie whipped her head around to see a group of silver-coated, squishy creatures emerging from the forest. Her anguished cries had drawn them from their wretched hunt. They rode atop four-legged beasts, brandishing long, shiny sticks that gleamed menacingly in the sunlight. As the creatures charged towards her, a white-hot rage consumed Perdie. Her grief, her anger, and the raw power of her newborn flame fused into a tempest of emotion. With a roar that shook the earth, Perdie reared up and unleashed her fire. A blinding torrent of fury erupted from her jaws, engulfing the charging creatures, their mounts, and everything in its path. In an instant, the clearing became an inferno. The silver-coated creatures and their steeds vanished, reduced to ash by the sheer intensity of Perdie's blaze. The conflagration spread with terrifying speed, racing through the forest and reducing everything to cinders. As her roar faded and the flames began to ebb, Perdie stood panting, smoke curling from her nostrils. She looked to the distance and saw the little pink squishy one still at the top of the central stone mountain, watching her from the safety of its perch. Rage welled up, and Perdie leapt into the air, wings beating furiously as she climbed high and dove, wings tucked, flaming hotter than a volcano, hotter than the surface of the sun, engulfing the entire mountain in holocaust, incinerating the pink one, incinerating all the little squishy creatures in their silly little caves, incinerating all their surroundings, melting the mountain and hovels to slag, laying waste to all she could see. She soared and spun and surveyed her revenge. Before her lay a blackened wasteland, a stark testament to the depths of her sorrow and wrath. But the creatures had paid the price for their hatred, their mistrust, their wanton violence against a naive and innocent dragon. No more. But she couldn't linger. She knew more squishy creatures would come from somewhere, and she had to return Mergle to their clan. With strength born of desperation and newfound ability, Perdie landed and gently wrapped Mergle's now useless wings close around him and gathered his body in her claws. Her wings strained as she took to the air, the added weight of Mergle's sagging form testing the limits of her endurance. The journey back across the river was grueling. Each beat was agony, the membrane of her wings stretching and tearing. She wasn't sure she could make it all the way, but she had to try. She owed it to Mergle. As the clan's forest and cliffs came into view, Perdie's energy waned and finally gave out. She crashed to the ground at the edge of their spring, her wings limp and tattered around her. But she had done it. She had brought Mergle home. As fatigue overcame her, Perdie curled protectively around Mergle's body. Before sleep took her, she thought of the flame that now burned within her, Mergle's final gift, and the vengeance she would wreak upon the squishy creatures who had taken him from her. In that moment, as she lay broken but undefeated, Perdie was forged anew. Gone was the young dragon preoccupied with flame-lighting gossip and her place among her peers. She had become something new, something fierce and terrible, and the world of both dragons and squishy creatures would never be the same. The End. This has been Dragon's Lost Love, written by David Neyland, narrated by Luke, an ElevenLabs v3 AI-generated voice. Copyright 1975, 2024, and 2026, David Neyland. All rights reserved. Production copyright 2026, David Neyland. All rights reserved.